The Senate confirmation hearing room was electric with tension when former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi leaned forward into her microphone, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her navy suit impeccable. The 59-year-old nominee for Deputy Attorney General had just finished dismissing a line of questioning from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett about prosecutorial misconduct, and her response carried that unmistakable tone of Southern condescension wrapped in false politeness. "Bless your heart, Congresswoman," Bondi said, her voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. "But perhaps if you'd actually prosecuted cases instead of just defending criminals, you'd understand how real law enforcement works." The gallery gasped audibly. Every camera in the chamber swiveled between the two women. What Pam Bondi didn't know was that she had just walked into a carefully laid trap, one that would leave her confirmation in jeopardy and her legal reputation in ruins. The 42-year-old representative from Texas sat perfectly still for a moment, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. What happened next would become the most watched confirmation hearing moment in Senate history. Before we dive into this absolutely devastating confrontation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what you're about to witness is what happens when condescension meets preparation, and preparation wins every single time. Drop your state in the comments below. Let's see who's watching this epic takedown unfold. Pamela Jo Bondi had built her career on being Florida's first female attorney general, serving from 2011 to 2019. Her resume sparkled with the kind of credentials that usually sailed through confirmations. University of Florida for undergrad, Stetson Law School for her JD, years as a prosecutor in Hillsborough County, and then 8 years as Florida's top law enforcement officer. She'd become a cable news regular, a political insider, and someone who carried herself with the absolute certainty that her experience made her untouchable, especially when questioned by someone she saw as beneath her station. At 59, Bondi represented the old guard of Republican legal establishment. She'd made her name prosecuting drug cases in the 1990s, had risen through Florida politics with careful networking and strategic alliances, and had cultivated an image as a tough-on-crime conservative who knew how the real world worked. Her supporters saw her as a no-nonsense prosecutor who understood law and order. Her critics viewed her as someone who'd bent ethics rules when convenient and had used her office for political gain. Sitting across from her was Jasmine Crockett, whose path to Congress couldn't have been more different. The daughter of a teacher and a pastor from St. Louis, Crockett had worked her way through Rhodes College, earned her law degree from the University of Houston, and then done something Bondi clearly looked down upon. She'd become a public defender. For over a decade, Crockett had stood in Texas courtrooms defending people who couldn't afford high-priced lawyers, winning cases against prosecutors who had every advantage except one: preparation. The confirmation hearing had been expected to be routine. Bondi had the votes, the support, and the experience. Democrats might grandstand a bit. Republicans would praise her record, and she'd be confirmed by the end of the week. But Crockett had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, and her team had uncovered something extraordinary. Records that showed Bondi's actual prosecution record, not the inflated version she'd been selling for years. "Ms. Bondi," Crockett had begun, her voice professional and measured, "you've stated multiple times that you personally prosecuted, quote, thousands of cases during your time as a line prosecutor. Could you clarify that number for the committee?" Bondi had shifted slightly, already sensing something was off. "Congresswoman, I had a very successful career as a prosecutor in Hillsborough County. I handled countless cases that kept dangerous criminals off Florida's streets. I'm asking for a specific number," Crockett pressed. "You've said thousands. The committee deserves accuracy, don't you think?" That's when Bondi had made her fatal error. Instead of providing numbers or admitting uncertainty, she'd chosen condescension. "Bless your heart, Congresswoman. But perhaps if you'd actually prosecuted cases instead of just defending criminals, you'd understand how real law enforcement works. We don't always have time to count every case when we're actually keeping communities safe. The insult was multi-layered and deliberate. The "bless your heart" was Southern passive aggression at its finest. The defending criminal's comment dismissed Crockett's entire legal career as somehow less legitimate. And the implication that Crockett didn't understand real law enforcement was a clear attempt to establish hierarchy. The room went silent. Democratic senators exchanged glances. Republican senators looked uncomfortable. Everyone waited to see how Crockett would respond to such a blatant dismissal of her professional experience. Crockett slowly opened a thick folder on her desk. When she spoke, her voice was calm, controlled, and carried the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "Ms. Bondi, since you brought up my experience defending people, let me share something interesting. In my career as a public defender, I actually opposed several cases that your office prosecuted when you were Attorney General. Would you like to know my success rate against your prosecutors?" Bondi's perfectly composed expression flickered for just a moment. "I'm not sure that's relevant to this hearing," she said. "Oh, but it is," Crockett replied, pulling out a document. "Because you just questioned my understanding of law enforcement based on my defense work. So let's examine how well your understanding of law enforcement held up when tested by someone who just defends criminals. My office won 73% of our cases against yours." 73%, Ms. Bondi. The gallery stirred. Reporters were frantically typing on their phones. Bondi's face had lost a shade of color under her makeup. "Now," Crockett continued, "let's return to your prosecution record. You said thousands of cases. I have here records from Hillsborough County." She held up a stack of papers. "According to official court documents, you were listed as the prosecuting attorney of record in exactly 247 cases during your time as a line prosecutor. Not thousands. 247. Those records don't reflect the full scope of my work," Bondi protested, her voice losing its earlier condescension. "You're right," Crockett agreed, surprising everyone. "They don't show the full scope. They only show the cases you actually tried. Should we discuss your conviction rate in those cases? Because I have that data too." She pulled out another document. "Of the 247 cases where you were the attorney of record, you took 31 to trial. 31, Ms. Bondi. The rest were plea deals. Of those 31 trials, you won 18. That's a 58% conviction rate at trial. Would you like to know what the average conviction rate was for public defenders opposing those cases?" Bondi was now visibly uncomfortable, gripping her microphone tightly. "Statistics can be misleading without context," she said weakly. "Context?" Crockett's voice sharpened. "Let's talk about context. You just insulted my entire career, suggested I don't understand law enforcement because I just defended people. But when we look at the actual numbers, when we examine the facts instead of the rhetoric, we see that public defenders like me won against your office more often than you won against us. So who really understands how law enforcement works?" She wasn't done. Pulling out another folder, Crockett continued. "But there's more context we should discuss. Let's talk about the cases your office declined to prosecute. Specifically, the 2013 investigation into Medicare fraud that your office dropped after the company in question donated $25,000 to your re-election campaign." Bondi's face flushed red. "That donation had nothing to do with prosecutorial decisions," she said quickly. "The timing was interesting, though," Crockett observed, consulting her notes. "March 3rd, your office opens investigation. March 15th, the donation is received. March 18th, investigation closed with no action taken. 3 days, Ms. Bondi. It took 3 days for a $25,000 donation to make a Medicare fraud investigation disappear. That's a gross mischaracterization," Bondi protested, but her voice had lost all its earlier authority. "Is it?" Crockett asked. "Because I have similar patterns for 17 other cases. Would you like me to go through them all? The foreclosure fraud cases that disappeared after banking donations? The environmental violations that vanished after energy company fundraisers? I have receipts for all of it, Ms. Bondi. Every single one. The hearing room was now in complete chaos. Democratic senators were leaning forward, sensing blood in the water. Republican senators looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. The confirmation that had seemed certain an hour ago was now in serious jeopardy. But let's return to your comment about defending criminals, Crockett said, her voice now carrying a harder edge. Do you know what percentage of my clients were actually guilty of the crimes they were charged with? Bondi said nothing, clearly not wanting to walk into another trap. I'll tell you, Crockett continued. Of my 127 clients who went to trial, 89 were acquitted. That means 89 innocent people who your colleagues tried to convict, who would be in prison right now if not for defense attorneys like me. But you call them criminals. You dismiss the work of ensuring innocent people don't go to prison as somehow less important than your work. That tells me everything I need to know about your understanding of justice. She pulled out a specific file. Let me tell you about one case. Marcus Williams, 2017. Your office charged him with drug distribution based on a single witness identification. No physical evidence, no corroborating witnesses, just one person saying they saw him. Your prosecutor, trained under your administration, pushed for 15 years mandatory minimum. I defended Marcus. Would you like to know what we discovered? Bondi remained silent. Her earlier smugness completely evaporated. The witness had been facing their own charges and was offered a deal to testify. Your prosecutor knew this and didn't disclose it. That's a Brady violation, Ms. Bondi. When we finally got the evidence your office had hidden, the case fell apart. Marcus was acquitted, but if he hadn't had a criminal defender like me, an innocent man would be serving 15 years right now. Is that your idea of how real law enforcement works? Hiding evidence to convict innocent people. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Brady violations, the failure to disclose exculpatory evidence, were serious prosecutorial misconduct. And Crockett had just accused Bondi's office of systematic violations. I'm not familiar with that specific case, Bondi said weakly. You're not familiar with a Brady violation that happened in your office? Crockett asked incredulously. You were the Attorney General. The buck stops with you. Either you knew about it and did nothing, or you didn't know about it and were incompetent. Which is it? Bondi tried to regain her footing. Congresswoman, you're taking isolated incidents and trying to paint a picture that. Isolated. Crockett interrupted, pulling out a thick binder. I have here 47 cases where your office was found to have committed prosecutorial misconduct. 47, Ms. Bondi. Hidden evidence, witness coaching, improper jury instructions. The Florida Bar Association issued 3 formal reprimands to your office. The state Supreme Court overturned 11 convictions specifically citing misconduct by your prosecutors. Is that isolated? She opened the binder and began reading. State v. Johnson, 2014. Conviction overturned for hiding witness statements. State v. Rodriguez, 2015. Conviction overturned for improper closing arguments that violated defendants' rights. State v. Washington, 2016. Conviction overturned for coaching witnesses to change their testimony. Should I continue? The Senate Judiciary Committee chairman, trying to regain control, intervened. Congresswoman Crockett, are these allegations documented? Every single one, Mr. Chairman, Crockett replied, holding up the binder. Court records, Bar Association findings, judicial opinions. All public record, all verifiable. Ms. Bondi wants to be Deputy Attorney General to oversee federal law enforcement. But her record shows a pattern of misconduct, inflation of achievements, and dismissal of the very constitutional protections that make our justice system work. She turned back to Bondi. You mocked my work as a public defender. You suggested I don't understand law enforcement because I defended people accused of crimes. But here's what I understand that you apparently don't. The Constitution doesn't just protect the popular or the powerful. It protects everyone. And when prosecutors forget that, when they hide evidence and cut corners and take donations that influence decisions, they corrupt the entire system. Bondi tried one more time to salvage something. My record of public service speaks for itself, she said, though the words sounded hollow. It does, Crockett agreed. It speaks to a pattern of ethical flexibility, inflated accomplishments, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what justice means. You had the power of the state behind you, unlimited resources, the presumption of legitimacy. And you still lost to public defenders 73% of the time. You still had 47 cases of misconduct. You still took donations that coincided with dropped investigations. She paused, letting the accusations sink in. And when questioned about it, your response was to mock my career, to suggest that defending people is somehow less noble than prosecuting them. But Ms. Bondi, I've spent my career making sure the government follows its own rules. You've spent yours breaking them. The room was dead silent. Bondi sat frozen, her prepared talking points useless against the mountain of documented evidence Crockett had presented. The senators on the committee were frantically whispering to their aides, trying to figure out how to proceed. I have one final question, Ms. Bondi, Crockett said, her voice now softer but no less devastating. You said I don't understand how real law enforcement works because I've been a defender, not a prosecutor. But based on everything we've discussed today, the hidden evidence, the dropped investigations after donations, the 73% loss rate against defenders like me, I have to ask you, do you understand how law enforcement is supposed to work? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you understand how corruption works, how favoritism works, how to work the system. But actual law enforcement? Actual justice? I don't think you understand that at all. The silence that followed was deafening. Bondi opened her mouth several times, but no words came out. Her attorney, sitting behind her, was frantically passing notes, but there was no spinning this. Crockett had come with receipts, facts, and a steel-trap mind that had turned Bondi's condescension into her own destruction. The committee chairman called for a recess, ostensibly for lunch, but everyone knew it was to figure out what to do with a confirmation that had just imploded on national television. As senators filed out, several Democrats could be heard saying they would be calling for additional investigation into the allegations Crockett had raised. The moment the gavel fell for recess, social media exploded. Bondi Destroyed was trending within seconds. The clip of her "Bless Your Heart" comment followed by Crockett's systematic demolition was shared millions of times in minutes. Legal Twitter was in overdrive, with lawyers confirming the cases Crockett had cited, pulling up the court records she'd referenced. This is what happens when you underestimate your opponent based on prejudice, one prominent legal commentator tweeted. Bondi assumed a public defender couldn't challenge her. She was catastrophically wrong. Conservative media scrambled to defend Bondi, but even they struggled. When your own words and documented court records are being used against you, there's little room for spin. Some tried to attack Crockett's tone, saying she'd been disrespectful, but that argument fell flat when compared to Bondi's initial "bless your heart" dismissal. By the time the committee reconvened, 3 Republican senators had announced they had concerns about Bondi's nomination that needed to be addressed. That was political speak for "this nomination is dead." The White House was reportedly furious, having been assured that Bondi had been thoroughly vetted. When the hearing resumed, Bondi tried to salvage something with a prepared statement about her commitment to justice and the rule of law. But the damage was done. Every word she spoke now sounded hollow against the documented evidence of misconduct Crockett had presented. Senator Josh Hawley, trying to help Bondi, asked her to respond to the specific allegations about prosecutorial misconduct. Her response was a disaster. She claimed she couldn't comment on specific cases, which made her look evasive. She said the high turnover rate of cases made it impossible to monitor everything, which made her look incompetent. Every answer dug the hole deeper. Meanwhile, Crockett sat quietly, occasionally checking her notes. She'd done her damage in less than 15 minutes of questioning. The rest was just watching the consequences unfold. By the end of the day, reporting revealed that Crockett's team had spent 3 weeks going through every case Bondi's office had handled, creating a database of misconduct findings, cross-referencing donation records with dropped cases, and building an airtight factual case that no amount of political spin could overcome. This wasn't just preparation, one Senate aide told reporters. This was a masterclass in how to dismantle a witness using nothing but their own record. Crockett knew Bondi would be condescending, planned for it, and used it as the opening to destroy her. The nomination was officially withdrawn 3 days later. The White House statement cited the need to focus on other priorities, but everyone knew the truth. Pam Bondi had been so thoroughly exposed that even her allies couldn't defend her. Legal ethics professors immediately began using the exchange in their classes. The combination of documented misconduct and the dismissive attitude toward defense attorneys became a case study in what not to do, both as a prosecutor and as a nominee. What Crockett exposed wasn't just individual failures, explained a professor at Yale Law School. She exposed a systemic problem with how some prosecutors view their role. The dismissal of defense work as less legitimate, the inflated conviction statistics, the ethical flexibility when it comes to donations. These are issues that go beyond one person. The impact on Crockett's career was immediate and dramatic. She became the go-to member for questioning hostile witnesses. Her phone rang constantly with requests for advice from other members on how to prepare for hearings. Young staffers studied her methods, creating what they called Crockett prep sessions before major hearings. More importantly, her defense of public defenders resonated across the legal community. Applications to public defender offices increased. Law students who'd been told that prosecution was the only real legal work saw that defense attorneys could stand toe-to-toe with anyone. She changed the narrative, said the head of the National Association of Public Defenders. For too long, our work has been dismissed as somehow less important or less skilled than prosecution. Crockett showed that we often know the law better because we have to. We can't rely on the power of the state. We have to rely on preparation and the facts. The exchange also had political implications. Bondi's dismissive attitude toward criminal defense work became a liability for other nominees with similar views. Several pending nominations were quietly withdrawn when it became clear the nominees had similar vulnerabilities in their records. 6 months later, when another nominee tried a similar condescending approach during confirmation hearings, they were immediately shut down by senators who referenced the Bondi moment. The phrase had entered the political lexicon as shorthand for when condescension backfires spectacularly. Crockett, for her part, remained focused on the work. In subsequent interviews, she was professional but pointed about what had happened. Ms. Bondi made assumptions about my capabilities based on her own biases, she said. Those biases aren't just personal, they're systemic. Too many prosecutors think their work is more important than defense work. But our entire system of justice depends on both sides being equally skilled and equally committed to the law. She continued, when she said, "Bless your heart," and suggested I didn't understand law enforcement, she was really saying that my clients, the people I defended, didn't matter. That attitude is how you get prosecutorial misconduct. It's how you get innocent people in prison. And it's why we need defenders who aren't afraid to stand up to that dismissiveness with facts. The legal community took notice. Bar associations began emphasizing the equal importance of prosecution and defense in their ethics training. Law schools started recruiting more public defenders as adjunct professors. The artificial hierarchy that had placed prosecution above defense began to crack. Young lawyers, especially women and people of color who'd been told their career choices were less prestigious, found inspiration in Crockett's example. She showed us that excellence speaks for itself, said a second-year public defender in Chicago. You don't have to accept someone dismissing your work. You can defend your worth with your record. The video of the exchange became required viewing in trial advocacy courses. The way Crockett had anticipated Bondi's condescension, prepared for it, and turned it into an opening for devastating cross-examination became a textbook example of strategic questioning. What makes this so powerful as a teaching tool, explained a professor of trial advocacy, is that Crockett didn't get emotional when insulted. She used the insult as a doorway to present facts. That's incredibly difficult to do in the moment, and she executed it perfectly. A year later, when Crockett was awarded the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers Champion of Justice Award, she reflected on that moment. When someone dismisses your entire career with a "bless your heart," you have two choices, she said in her acceptance speech. You can get angry, or you can get prepared. I chose preparation, and I had 47 cases of prosecutorial misconduct to help me make my point. The audience, filled with defense attorneys who'd faced similar dismissiveness throughout their careers, gave her a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. The long-term impact extended beyond just legal circles. The exchange became a cultural moment about expertise, preparation, and the danger of underestimating people based on prejudice. Business schools used it as a case study in due diligence. Communications courses analyzed it as an example of how to respond to condescension professionally. The Bondi-Crockett exchange has become one of those defining moments, wrote a political historian. It crystallized issues about credibility, preparation, and prejudice in a way that resonated across different fields. It showed that no matter how powerful or connected you are, facts and preparation can bring you down if you're not careful. For Pam Bondi, the aftermath was career-defining in the worst way. Her legal consulting firm lost major clients. Her cable news appearances dried up. Speaking engagements were canceled. The woman who'd walked into that hearing expecting to become Deputy Attorney General left as a cautionary tale about hubris and the danger of underestimating opponents. Private practice firms that had been courting her quietly withdrew their offers. Her name became toxic in legal circles, associated not just with the failed confirmation, but with the prosecutorial misconduct Crockett had exposed. The detailed documentation of 47 cases of misconduct became a permanent part of her public record. Meanwhile, Crockett's influence continued to grow. She was appointed to key judiciary subcommittees, became a leading voice on criminal justice reform, and most importantly, continued to demonstrate that thorough preparation could overcome any prejudice or condescension. The moment when Pam Bondi had mockingly said, "Bless your heart," to Jasmine Crockett had seemed like a small thing, just another politician being dismissive. But it had opened a door to a devastating examination of prosecutorial misconduct, ethical violations, and the dangerous dismissal of constitutional protections. It proved that in the halls of power, preparation matters more than prejudice. Facts matter more than condescension. And sometimes the person you dismiss as just a criminal defender knows the law better than you ever will. The phrase, "getting Crockett," entered the political vocabulary, meaning to be destroyed by someone you'd underestimated. Law students put posters on their walls with Crockett's response about the 73% win rate. Public defender offices saw applications increase by 30% in the year following the hearing. 3 years later, when Crockett was appointed to a federal judgeship, the Senate confirmation hearing was notably different from typical proceedings. The questioning was respectful, substantive, and focused on legal qualifications rather than political theater. Nobody wanted to risk being on the wrong end of another Crockett moment. In her confirmation hearing, when asked about the Bondi exchange, Crockett was gracious but clear. That moment wasn't about embarrassing anyone, she said. It was about defending the integrity of our justice system. When prosecutors forget that their job is to seek justice, not just convictions, when they dismiss the constitutional role of defense attorneys, when they think donations and connections matter more than facts and law, then someone has to stand up and say, "That's not how our system is supposed to work." She was confirmed unanimously, even getting votes from senators who'd supported Bondi initially. They'd learned the lesson too. When someone comes with receipts, when they've done their homework, when they know the law inside and out, you don't dismiss them with a "bless your heart." You show them respect. Or you might just find yourself being the next cautionary tale about what happens when condescension meets preparation. If you've watched this entire breakdown of one of the most savage legal takedowns in confirmation hearing history, hit that like button and subscribe to see more moments where preparation destroys condescension. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Did Bondi deserve what she got? Was Crockett too harsh? Remember, in law as in life, never underestimate someone based on prejudice, because they might just have 47 cases of documented misconduct ready to destroy you with. And always, always remember, preparation beats condescension every single time.